of you already read Inkheart, is that true? Is there anybody in the room who never read any ink book? Aha! Here they come. Okay, so what I will do is, because it's now very, very difficult to read a chapter when you have no clue what these stories are about. So I tell you only one thing. These stories are about a man and his daughter who have a very rare gift that when they read aloud, and I promise I cannot do it, they read people out of books. So they have no clue who comes out. They have no clue who comes in, for that is the deal. They read from a book and somebody gets lost and somebody comes out. And I will read you a short chapter from In Death, which is the third book, about what that means for the writer. Because if you as a writer, like my writer Fenolio, end up in your own book, what does that mean? And if you suddenly realize that when you write words, they come true, they become flesh and blood, what does that mean? So I will read to you a chapter in which my writer Fenolio ended up in his own story and is carried away by a giant right now, because he thought it would be a good idea to have a giant. And I'll read this chapter to you to show what a very dangerous job I have. Okay? Okay. And that's therefore they gave me the cross. And I'm a knight now. Okay. Fenolio. In the hand of a giant. His own giant. Not bad, huh? No reason to be sad about it. If only the Black Prince had looked rather livelier. If Fenolio, he told himself. If only you had some idea how the story is to go on now. The huge fingers held him both firmly and carefully, as if they were used to carrying small humans around. Not necessarily a reassuring idea. Fenolio really didn't want to become some giant child's toy. He had little doubt that it would be one of the nastiest ways of meeting one's end. But would anyone ask his opinion? No. Which brings us back to the one crucial question, thought Fenolio, as his stomach bumped about as it was, slowly but surely began to feel. It did look alarmingly lifeless lying in the giant's other hand. What a shame! All the trouble he had gone to keep the man alive. Till, however much her old bones ache. Good God, those fingers, each of them as long as one of his own arms. But clearly the giant had lost interest in him for the moment. He was examining his other catch with obvious concern. Finally, he shook the Black Prince as if he were a watch that had run down, and sighed when he still didn't move. With another deep sigh, he sank to his knees, astonishingly gentle given his size, looked sadly at the black face, and then carefully laid the prince on the thick moss under the trees. It was just what Fenolio's grandchildren had done with the dead birds they took away from their cat. They had exactly the same look on their faces as they laid the small bodies to rest among his roses. Pippo used to make a cross out of twigs for every dead animal, but the giant didn't do that. He didn't bury him either. He just covered him with dry leaves very carefully, as if he didn't want to disturb his sleep. And then he rose to his feet again, looked at Fenolio, perhaps to make sure that he at least was still breathing, and went on, every stride, as long as 12 human footsteps, perhaps more. Going where? Away from everything, Fenolio, far away. He felt those mighty fingers closing more tightly around him again, and then he couldn't believe his ears. The giant began humming. Did giants sing human songs? Whether they did or not, this one was obviously happy with himself and the world. Perhaps he was thinking about giving him to his son. Oh no, Fenolio shuddered. Suppose the giant child pulled them apart the way children sometimes dismember insects. You fool, he thought. You arrogant old fool! How could you think there are words to control the giant? Another strike. And then another. Goodbye forever, Umbra. Presumably he'd never find out how his story was going to end. Fenolio closed his eyes. And suddenly, he thought he heard his grandchildren, high, insistent voices. Grandfather, play dead for us. Of course. Nothing easier. How often he'd lain there on his sofa without moving, even when that prodded his stomach, with his wrinkled cheeks, with their little fingers. Play dead. Fenoglio uttered a loud groan. Oh, made his limbs go limp, and fixed his eyes. There. The giant stopped and looked at him in dismay. Keep your breathing shallow, Fenoglio. It would be better not to breathe at all, but then your stupid old head would probably burst. When the giant puffed into his face again, he almost sneezed, but Fenoglio's grandchildren had puffed in his face too, although with considerably smaller mouths and breath that didn't smell quite so strong. Keep still, Fenoglio. Still. The mighty face became a mask of disappointment. Another sigh rose from that broad chest. A cautious prod with his forefinger. A few incomprehensible words, and the giant knelt down. The downward plunge made Fenoglio feel dizzy, but he went on playing dead. The giant looked around for help, as if someone might come fluttering down from the trees to revive his toy. A few snowflakes fell from the grey sky. It was getting colder again, and settled on the giant's huge arms. The giant sighed and murmured to himself. Obviously, he really was severely disappointed. Then he put Fenoglio down on the ground, gave him one last experimental prod with his finger. Don't move, Fenoglio told himself, and sprinkled a handful of dry oak leaves on his face. They had wood lice in them, and other creatures of the forest floor, much of which had a great many legs, and all of them immediately looked for new hiding places in Fenoglio's clothes. Keep playing dead, he thought. Didn't Pippo once put a caterpillar on your face? And much to his disappointment, you still didn't move? And he did not move. Not even when something very hairy crawled over his nose. He waited for the footsteps to go away, and the ground beneath him to stop vibrating like a drum. Away went the giant he had called. Away he went, leaving Fenoglio alone with all his other creatures. Now what?